Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave. Let us know where you think we got it right and where you think we got it wrong, which you can do by visiting unsilentpodcast.com, our Rumble channel, Facebook, or any of the other social channels. So let's get into it. What's it like to live in July 2024, Brian?
Well, I think I found a good video that will encapsulate at least part of the moment.
All right.
I imagine when I bookmarked this video, which was yesterday or the day before, I imagine, what's going to be like in 50, 60, 70 years. I believe we're in a period of time that will be studied, much like we study World War II and the Revolutionary War and et cetera, et cetera. I really believe that we're in a period of time that people are going to look back and go, what the hell are they doing, right?
Yes.
But the difference in Kenny G's era, so, again, looking 60, 70 years in the future, is they will have an amount of media that is just, it might be too much to navigate. I mean, we look back at World War II footage, and there's stuff, but it's newsreels. The video I'm going to share wouldn't have made the cut in 1933 or 1943. Like it wouldn't have made the cut. And then we look back at World War I, and you have the black and white robotic marching. But in Kenny G's era, in the year 2080 or 2070 or whatever, they're going to have maybe millions of hours of footage to go through between all the podcasts and TV shows and pundits and all this stuff. And so I feel like part of our responsibility for you and I is just, what's it like for just two normal dudes? We don't get paid by a news channel. We're not professional political pundits. We're just two dudes like looking around and like, what the heck is going on from our perspective, right?
Right, exactly.
So this clip I'm going to show you is, I don't know if I have her title correct. Becky Pringle looks like is her name, and she's some kind of National Education Association or something like that. Oh, she's the president of the largest teachers union. And so here's a 39-second clip of her giving a speech a few days ago. So buckle up. Here we go.
Anyway,
all right.
We have to win all the things, all the things, all the things. Our colleagues are depending on us to win all the things. Keep going, NEA. To preserve our democracy, we must win all the things. Delegates, we won't go back. We will keep going forward because we are the NEA. We are the NEA. We are the NEA. And that's what we do.
Well, I have to admit that's the first time I've seen that clip play through. I just saw a snippet of it the other day, but yeah.
So here's what I took away. I'll give you a minute to collect your thoughts, and because I knew I was going to play this, here's what I've come to conclude from watching this video. We are now in an era where volume matters more than substance.
Yeah.
What she kept saying is, we must win all the things.
All the things. What things?
So we don't even have the capacity. The president of the largest teachers union in the country does not have the capacity to articulate specificity to anything, to give no talking points. All that matters now is who's loudest. Is that a fair assessment? I think the reason I chose this clip is because I truly believe this encapsulates much of the era we're in now.
100%. It does. Absolutely. It does. Because it is pure 100% emotionalism. I mean, there is literally, all the things. What things? I mean, I see a Hyundai out there. I mean, what things? So it's like, it's 100% emotionalism. I sort of felt like I was at a revival meeting.
Did you? I felt like I was being sentenced to cruel and unusual punishment.
Well, I mean, they aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, Um, I mean, clearly she was preaching. I don't know. You saw those people getting up behind her. I mean, were they like, "Amen"?
Yeah,
What
but
was
a
that?
preacher, I don't know, quotes scripture or tells stories from human experience or the Bible. Like there's points, Dave. It's not we're gonna we're gonna
Well,
inherit all the things. That's not what the preacher says.
yeah, there are some, shall we say, charismatic denominations that are all about
Okay,
emotionalism,
all right,
and so
fair enough.
there. I've been to a few of those services where everybody's running around and laying hands, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, if I was there, she probably would have run up to me and tried to cast the demons of
Yeah, I
conservatism
don't
out of
think
me
she
or
would have
something.
later. Well, she would have laid her hands on you, but probably not in a positive
Yeah,
way.
well, not in a very friendly way. It was very scary. Well, and this is, I tell you what's really weird about that. I mean, there's lots of things that are really weird about that, but one of the things that's really weird about that is these are the people who are professionally charged with making sure that the next generation is educated. They're
Yeah,
supposed to be smart.
yeah.
These are the people that are supposed to be doing that.
But
Um,
I think again, Dave, this is where your Evergreen State College education is not serving you, in that you're missing the point. They must be educated on the emotional things, not the
right.
logical, pragmatic, step by step things.
Is that an EQ thing, an emotional
Yeah,
quotient
emotional
or
quotient.
something
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
something
for
like
sure.
that? I think,
Yeah. So
yeah.
I also had this thought, and this is going to be completely unfair for me to say, and it's probably going to sound harsher than I mean it, but I found myself thinking this is the culmination of 25 years of The View being on TV.
Yes.
Right? It's been this slow moving train wreck of, in the beginning, like there was points made and things like that, and now we just, after 25 years, it's just we scream. And by the
Yeah.
way, if it was five dudes on a TV show, I would say the same thing. Five
Yeah.
people just
Yeah.
screaming nonsense, which there's plenty of that. But the first thought
Yeah.
I had was, this is 25 years of View kind of climaxing.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, that's absolutely true. It's 100%, ideological tribalism.
Yeah.
It is absolutely 100% pure whip 'em up mob mentality. Grab the pitchfork,
Yeah.
grab, we're
Yeah.
storming the
I didn't even think
castle.
about that. You're 100% right. Yeah.
I mean, it's 100% mob mentality. I mean, I would imagine, they'll probably make a lot of whatever the equivalent of movies is when Kenny G is around. They're probably going to make a number of movies
Yeah.
about this era and about how we just completely lost our mind and just screamed at each other, and whoever could scream the loudest wins.
Yeah. So the other reason I chose this clip again, I don't think this would have made the cut in the World War II era press releases.
I don't think so.
But this does, like, if I had to pick one image out of last month or a series of images or video, I think this is pretty close. And now my favorite. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, that one, it also, so that's the NEA, but that same spirit, if you will, is what's infused a lot of these college riots about, we talked before about how a lot of the students that were out there screaming, yelling, they didn't even know why they were there. They were just there to scream and yell. They just wanted to be part of it. And, they just wanted to belong. And so they wanted to belong to an intense emotional experience. So, the George Floyd riots, all these other things that were it was just pure emotionalism.
Yeah. One of my favorite parts of that also is it's been reported, and I don't know how accurate this stuff ever is, so I can't speak to the validity of the reporting, but it's been reported that she spent $8,500 over 3 days to get her hair done for that performance.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I invite you to go back and take a look at the picture. It looks like Tom Bosley from Happy Days. It looks like his haircut.
$8,500.
$8,500.
So but it goes to the point of I mean, you've got this dichotomy here of anybody who can do that has significant wealth. I mean, they're not Jeff Bezos or
no. Let me clarify. She didn't pay for that. No.
Well, sure, the NEA paid for that, which has significant wealth. It's a very rich organization, obviously.
Yeah.
So you've got that on one hand, and you've got this mob mentality, storm the castle on the other hand, which seems to me to be a bit of cognitive dissonance, you might say.
Yeah.
But there you go. That's where we're at.
Yeah, I don't know how much that $8,500 came from tax dollars or union dues or whatever, but I would argue that they didn't get their money's worth. So,
Yeah.
moving along. Last week we talked about the debate or the debacle, whatever you want to
Yes.
call it,
Yeah.
and we named that episode "Unmasked" because
Yes.
it seems to you and I that like the emperor was exposed not having any clothes on, right?
Yeah, there's no clothes.
I think it's interesting. And this would make the news cuts if Kenny G's looking back in time. There'd be no shortage of people talking about this. But I find it super interesting on two things that have happened over the last 7 days since you and I recorded last. One is how the media has completely, more or less, at least for now, turned on President Biden. There's no question, right?
Yep.
And the other thing that strikes me is it's almost like they have a timer set, like the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN. They have this 18-month timer set from the time that, a not left-leaning news outlet reports on something until they then verify it, right?
Right. Yeah.
If you look at the Hunter Biden laptop, if you look at the COVID origination, if you look at the harm done to children on lockdowns, if you look at the vaccine benefits and harms, it's about an 18-month lag for the New York Times to say what Fox News might have said, or somebody on Substack or something like that, or somebody on X, formerly known as Twitter, would have said. They're right in line. Like now, in this case, some people were talking about the cognitive decline thing, maybe back in 2020, even 2021 for sure, 2022 for sure. But there's this it's almost like a playbook they're following. Like there's the New York Times specifically and CNN specifically have this kind of programmed lag time. I just find it interesting that the pattern is just very, very consistent, where they argue and it's lies and embellishments and cheap fakes and all these accusations and conspiracy theories and all that kind of stuff. And then eventually they go, yeah, okay, well, that's the way it is. We're on to the next thing.
Well, and there's several possibilities, but one of the other possibilities is that 18 months, that sort of almost 2 years-ish period of time, is how long it takes for things to become organically undeniable.
Yeah.
I mean, so eventually the truth outs, right? Eventually things are
eventually gravity wins. Yep.
Gravity wins. It just, how long does the fall take is the question. And so it could be that's really just kind of where they're at. And I think to a great extent, the reason that they're turning on him is because they can't deny it anymore. And because if they do, they're going to look even more foolish. I mean, really, the biggest casualty, I think, of this is not even President Biden. It's the news media. Yeah. Because, if anybody bothers to look, and there's this thing called the internet, that they could look in, plenty of people have been pointing this out, falling upstairs and all of this stuff, as you say, for a couple of years now. I mean, he's been they've called him Joey Gaffs for a long time.
Yeah.
And, were those really gaffes, or were those just, brain farts that he had, just because he's getting old, and too bad that he's getting old.
Yeah. Yeah. So separate from the kind of 18 month to 2 year lag that we're consistently seeing over and over again on a variety of topics.
Yeah.
It is stark how the press room, from clips I've seen, has gone from this, lobbing softball kind of questions. You got the one or two guys who ask a tough question, and they're skipped for a few weeks, and they get asked another tough question. The press room, the White House press corps interaction with President Trump versus President Biden, I mean, they're like night and day for sure.
World's
but
different.
That changed overnight. A week and a half ago, or whenever the debate was. And 2 weeks ago, I guess it was now. And they're not relenting. Like it's a barrage now, and it's interesting to see. And the cynic in me says, well, not only do things just become undeniable and gravity wins,
right,
but also, I don't know, 50, 80 million, whatever people saw it live, and then however many people saw clips on the internet. If you're the news media and you continue to tell people that like your own eyes are lying to you, kind of a thing, like all of 1984, eventually enough people, I mean, again, gravity wins. So enough people will kind of wake up, and if their eyeballs are not on CNN and the New York Times anymore, their eyeballs are somewhere else, and that's dollars. Eyeballs equals dollars in today's market.
Absolutely.
And so I think that it's not only I'm hard pressed to believe it's a reputational thing, because at this point, as you pointed out, much of their credibility is gone.
Yeah.
It feels like the financial gravity is probably winning.
100%. I mean, it's whether you count it as their reputation or dollars. It's all power. It's all
Influence.
their position in society. and yes, when everybody's seen it, and you can't say that. Well, it's taken out of context. Well, you can't take 90 minutes out of context. You can't.
Well, it's taken out of context of his entire 50 years in politics.
Right,
I mean, come on.
Right. It's
a
little hard to do.
One bad night in 50 years.
Yeah, it's a little hard to say that you're distorting that, and so their position, the media's position, in every way is threatened if they don't come out, and if they. The other problem is that if people remind them, well, we said that a few years. No. We're the ones who are telling you the truth. We're the ones who are saying, and it just came to light. And what you were talking about. So, I think we're in a situation where it's self-preservation as much as anything else. Self-preservation of position, power, money, all of those. And the other thing is it's self-preservation in terms of most of them really do believe that Trump is the reincarnation of Hitler. And if they, turn on one of your own, if it saves you from the reincarnation of Hitler.
Simultaneously with this abrupt, 163-degree turn on how the press is treating Biden, simultaneously, there's still the holdouts. There's still the stalwart. There's still the pundits who are like, nope, he's our guy, because no matter what, he's not that guy. Right. And the level of that thought process has, in my opinion, really been exposed. I believe it was really exposed before, but the layers of the onions we're getting down to the core of the onion now, as far as the layers, because they're so steadfast, and they're just flat out saying now. I think Whoopi Goldberg said something like, "I don't care if he's crapping his pants. It's not Trump."
Right. Well, Bill Maher. Remember what Bill Maher said? He said, "I'll vote for Biden if he's just a head in a blue jar, or a jar of blue liquid." So,
Yeah. So, it's now that statement you just quoted. I think that, and I would probably consider myself in this category also. Most people would hear that and oh, okay, he's being funny, he's being hyperbolic, whatever. I think it's being shown that they're not being hyperbolic.
No, they're not.
Even a crazy situation where these people are saying, in these extreme situations, he's still not that guy, and that guy is the end of democracy.
Yeah, well, that's the bottom line. I mean, that's really the bottom line, and there's really only one disagreement in that camp, in that side, and that is, what's our best way to defeat Trump? Yeah. So, one side says, well, look, and there was somebody, I was listening to me yesterday. They've got this 11-point matrix of factors that has shown from now back to 1900, if somebody gets 7 of the 11, they will win the presidency. And 2 of those is incumbency and not an open primary. So there's plenty of people who say that it doesn't matter if Biden's senile, he's the incumbent. People will vote on memory, and so therefore he's our best choice. There's a bunch of people who say no, that's a sure way to get Trump elected, and so therefore we have to do, even if Harris is no more popular, perhaps less popular than Trump, we've got to get somebody else in there. And so the only thing they disagree on, they all agree that Trump's Hitler. The only thing they disagree on is what's the best path to defeat him.
Yeah, for sure. It's just the thing that is so notable for me. I mean, I'm 50 now, so I've voted in 8 elections or whatever, presidential elections, whatever it's been. We've gone from in the old days, circa 1992, my first election I voted in. It was very much about choosing who had a better vision for the country.
Yes.
Right. And then it slowly morphed into who was protecting a vision of a country.
Right.
And now it's just we got to beat that guy. And it
Right.
literally is a guy now. It's not.
Yeah.
Now, I would argue also that it's the values that guy represents. I've said that numerous times on here. But the talking points are no longer about the future, the success.
Right.
It's even devolved from, well, we can't be that. That's what they want. We can't have that now. And it's even more pointed than that now, which is that one guy will ruin everything, and all money, energy, resources need to go into beating that guy no matter what. And the thought of like what success looks like for the country is, if it's a thought at all, it's an afterthought.
No, nobody's talking about it. The only thing that dominates, and I think this is probably true in a crisis era, we'd have to think about the previous crisis eras and test that. But I think it's probably true about a crisis era, is it doesn't matter what you're for in this election. It's about who and what you're against.
Yeah.
So, Trump and Biden are stand-ins for their cutouts. We've talked about that before. They're cutouts for what we're against. So those that are against what, and the other thing is what we're against to a great extent is a caricature. There's all this freak out about Project 2025, which everything I've heard about it is kind of a caricature. It's like, well, slavery's coming back and abortion's illegal and it's illegal to be gay, this, this stuff. So Biden is a cutout for one side and Trump is a cutout for the other side. And whoever the election is about, whoever the election is focused on loses.
Right.
It's bizarre. It's not like, what Ronald Reagan, Morning in America, our best days are ahead, city shining, sitting and shining on a hill, even George Bush, aspirational, read my lips, no new taxes. And
even Obama. Obama was his 2008 campaign was very aspirational and
yes, absolutely.
A picture of a wonderful future. And Bill Clinton, no different. That whole era of presidents. And then around the time of Obama's second term, the second time he ran is when it shifted from the aspirational to the defensive. And then when Trump came in, it just everything was toast after that.
Broke loose.
Again, there's plenty of things that will be looked back on that, and people more educated than I am would have better opinions than me probably on that stuff. But it's fascinating to watch how it's evolved or devolved over time.
But I think it's important to sort of, when you put a pin in it for Kenny G, if we put a pin in what does this era feel like, and how are you going to know when you're in this era again, when this era rolls around? You're going to know when this era rolls around when everybody's against something, but nobody is real. But the people that are for things are just like, it doesn't matter. Blue head in a jar, it doesn't matter. So that's, and it wouldn't, and even if we didn't have these two guys, even if we didn't have Trump and Biden, the two people that nobody wants to run,
we saw it with
have somebody.
And it was somewhat in, who did Obama run against the first time? Was it McCain?
McCain, yeah. McCain.
Okay.
Romney's second time, yeah.
More so, it happened a little bit with McCain, but more so with Romney.
Yes.
When he's going to put you back in chains kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like that was the shift from, here's the aspiration we're aiming towards.
Here's my vision,
out for those guys. Now, it wasn't so much about him. He happened to be the quote unquote figurehead of the election, which I'm not really sure how that all happened, but whatever. But we began seeing it there. Now, I'm not meaning to Reagan said plenty of crappy things about Jimmy Carter. I'm not suggesting that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sure.
But the overarching theme has shifted from aspirational to defensiveness to that guy's got to lose.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Completely shifting gears here. Talking about a number of things came up this week regarding illegal immigration. And one of the things I find fascinating about this topic is in Kenny G's time, around the year 2080 or 2070, somewhere in there, how this immigration how the immigration thing is now will either be seen as one of two things, I believe. One is those are the awesome first steps it took to get us where we are now. Right. We wouldn't be the great nation we are today if we didn't have this open immigration. Right. Or what the hell were those guys thinking? Look at all the time, energy, resources it cost us to undo this.
Yeah.
To to now have the great nation we have, because Kenny G presumably will think he lives in a great nation, like I did,
Sure.
and do. I mean, to be fair,
sure.
So it seems like this is all going to be looked at through the lens of the winner, right?
Of course, yeah, that's how history's
how,
written.
How we know history is written by the victors, because how these things are framed and presented is all about who won, which value set won, right?
Right.
So Biden came out this week and said there's this thing called the SAVE Act going through, I think, the House of Representatives at the federal level. And it would just be, it's a law to ensure that you can't vote in elections if you're not a U.S. citizen.
If you're not a citizen, right.
All right. Biden has already said pre-vote that he'll veto it.
Right.
And there wouldn't be enough votes in the House to overcome his veto, and it probably wouldn't pass the Senate anyway. So I don't know. Interesting that, like, to like, knowing the tough lift it would be to get this thing passed anyway, that he would come out and so, if I'm paraphrasing this correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, the president of the United States, the executive of the executive branch of the United States, says he will veto a law, if passed, that would only allow U.S. citizens to vote in U.S. elections.
That's about it.
In what other universe would that even remotely make sense? I mean,
no.
even if you're all for, like I don't mean illegal immigration, but like, if you're just like, we need to bring in 5 million people a year legally, and we just change the legal requirements.
Right.
Even if you're for that, how could it make any sense to say the people who don't live in our house get to decide the rules of the house?
Right. Well, because there you go again with that logic thing.
Yeah, I know.
That's, you and your rationality, Brian. I tell you, you need to spend some time at Evergreen.
Snatched out of me.
You need to spend some time at Evergreen. They'll beat that at you with a frisbee. I tell you.
Right.
Well, this is again where when you take a narrative and make the narrative define every fact. So the narrative is this: America is a racist country, and the people on the Republican side are a bunch of racist, bigot, homophobes. They beat kittens in their spare time. These are just bad people. And so therefore anything that they do must be in service of their racism and bigotry and all this stuff. So therefore, if you are saying that only citizens can vote, it's because you don't like brown people.
Right.
You just must like, because there's mostly brown people. Ergo, since it's mostly brown people that are coming over, non-white people, because by the way, you're white supremacist. If it's mostly these people that are coming over, then the only reason you would do this, your secret motive is not this logical statement you just made. Your secret motive is that you're a white supremacist. That's where that's so it defines the fact. You take it, and this is another thing, that thing that we just watched, that lady screaming at us. It's all about a narrative, and then whatever facts you need to use to support the narrative, and even to the extent that you define what the facts mean, even to the extent that you define these facts, it's all in service of the tribal narrative.
Yeah,
all of it.
Yeah. I can't imagine going back more than 10 years, let's say 15 at the most.
Right.
Anytime before 2009, 2008, somewhere in there, and explaining to a citizen of any country, not even just ours, any country, that the highest ranking official in your government will crush a law only allowing your citizens to vote.
Yep.
In Ethiopia, that wouldn't make any sense. In Russia, that wouldn't make any sense. In Canada, that wouldn't make nowhere does that make any sense.
And the only reason it didn't happen then is because the driving tribal anger level was not at such a stage when we would check our brains at the door. Some people would, a percentage of the people would, but the general populace was not at the place where, and so again, a defining characteristic for Kenny G is when people are willing to set aside rationality. A majority of people, or a significant percentage of people, maybe not even the majority, are willing to set aside rational logic so that something like this can happen in order to promote their own sides, their own group narrative.
Yeah.
That's a feature of the age.
Yeah. Now, simultaneously, I came across this story, and again, this is on the internet, so I can't speak to the validity of the reporting, but it's now being reported that the DMV is registering illegal immigrants for voting when they get their driver's license.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So we're saying that we're not going to have a law that prohibits illegal immigrants from voting, and we're going to register them to vote when they get their driver's license, and that we don't really want illegals to vote. You're trying to squash U.S. citizens who are black and brown from voting if you're against these things. Those are the three things we're saying simultaneously. Okay.
Well, and also that that idea of registering people to vote at the DMV in Washington State, that's been the case for a while. You don't have to prove that you're a citizen, and they always ask you. When I go to renew my license, oh, do you want to register to vote?
Yeah.
They don't ask me anything about anything. So it's been there as a stealth for quite some time. Now it's there overtly.
Yeah.
Because migration.
So this immigration issue is arguably one of the top 5 issues of our era, I would say.
Sure.
Like you got climate change, you got abortion,
very concerned.
you got LGBT, and you got this, and you probably have one or two other things, but these are like the top issues that we're fighting over, basically. Right. And I had this, I've been kind of, this thought's been kind of evolving in my head for the last couple of months. And I think I kind of have it in a way where I could ask it in a way that makes sense. So I'm wondering, is there a significant cohort of U.S. citizens who are interested in importing migrants so that people of certain wealth classes and status classes and things like that, upper middle class, wealthy Americans, can feel superiority amongst an underclass? And what I mean by that is, it's not in fashion to look down on poor people who are native born.
Sure.
Like there's all kinds of isms attached to that, right?
Sure.
So that's not in fashion anymore. But boy, would it feel really righteous to import people to quote unquote help them and only expect that they do the labor we don't want to do in return.
Sure. I mean, I think there's a phrase that I remember hearing, great white savior, as the white folks went around the world, they wanted to feel good about themselves. And so we went to these places, and, and so now if we can, it's much more convenient if we can bring them here and feel like we're the savior, and so, yeah, there's a certain amount of savior complex, I think,
but
as a part of that.
Feels to me like, I guess the follow-up question or deeper underlying question would be is that righteousness that comes along with being the savior a mask for wanting an approved underclass that we can feel superior to?
It could be. It could be. I know it's certainly not even necessarily feeling superior to, but being in a superior position of,
that's
and they need you.
Sure. Yeah, that's a better way to say it. Yeah.
And so they need you, and so they will then do the things you want them to do, which is just as nefarious as feeling superior to them.
Yeah.
Because they'll vote the way I want them to vote.
I also argue that's the same logic that got us slavery for eons.
It is. Well, of course it is. Absolutely. We can choose people that are not in a position to resist us, to do things to benefit us without benefiting them.
So if I'm a upper middle class or wealthy person of any nationality I don't think really matters here, in this context, living in the Upper East Side in New York, and it's I can't say anything about the poor people in the neighborhood because there's isms attached to that.
Yeah.
Right. You lose the self-righteousness when you have those conversations over coffee or tea.
That's right.
But if we brought in people who were more disadvantaged, that were a little less than, they're not really citizens, and they don't have the baggage that comes along with all the isms we're going through right now.
Sure. Yeah.
And maybe I'm just being too cynical, and that could be completely the case. I would fully accept it. Somebody pointed out that I was just being too cynical, but it feels to me like it's a mixture of this having an approved upon group that I can demonstrate my superior status and influence
Yeah.
relative to, but also I get to mask that by saying, yeah, but look all the good we're doing for them. Look how unfortunate they would be if it wasn't for us doing this great
You
thing. But
bet.
secretly,
You
it's
bet.
not us doing the great thing. Secretly, if I'm that person who's all for immigration, which I'm not, by the way,
Right.
illegal immigration specifically, then I have this built-in like cover.
Yeah.
But
well,
it feels to me like the same mindset that sent Christians and Puritans and whatever into the tribal lands of the great wide open Wild West to change them to Christianity and things like that. Like, and basically, we didn't really enslave them so much, but you know, their status was diminished tremendously, I would say, right? And those are the people we look on now. Those people, the Upper East Side people I'm talking about, look back on those people with disdain. This feels like the same behavior to me.
Well, sure. It's virtue signaling. I get to feel virtuous about myself because I brought these people here or I allowed them to come here. And now
allowed them to come here. I think that's a key phrase. Yeah.
It is. And they need me, everybody wants to feel needed.
Yep.
And they need my superior wisdom and and they need my money, which I'll give them through the federal government. So it's virtue signaling. At the end of the day, it's people wanting, in the past, people felt in society, people felt virtuous because they did, they gave of themselves. They gave, the help your neighbor and, love your neighbors, you love yourself, and this is sort of, I think in some ways, a little bit of a perversion of that. I mean, I've gotten in debates, for instance, about, this is related, but a little bit tangential. Well, if you're a good Christian, you ought to be for paying taxes because we got to help the poor. Well, it's like, I can feel virtuous at no cost to myself because these poor people are here and because I advocate for high taxes and so these poor people get the benefit of that. And therefore I get the virtue.
Yeah. Yeah. You get the virtue without the pain or
Exactly.
you share a tremendous percentage of the burden of the pain.
What a sweet deal. What a sweet deal. I mean, and this is also the pushback also the pushback from a moral perspective. When I get in debates about, is it virtuous to pay taxes or is it virtuous to go out there to soup kitchen and give of your time or give to a charity or something like that. And I contend that there's nothing really virtuous in paying taxes other than, keeping the country alive. You got to do that. But the virtue is when you give something sacrificially or when you give of your own time directly to somebody else to help them.
Yeah. Yeah. I my gut tells me I'm not being too cynical, but there's certainly the possibility that I am. But it just feels like a cover to me. It feels like
100%.
The more nefarious underlying driver is being masked by the virtue.
And I suspect, and I've known a lot of folks. I know a lot of folks right now that are ideologically different than me, that are very nice people who believe in basically open borders, and so they don't have overtly, I think, negative intentions, but they do see this. If you boil it down, if you get to the root of it, it's either what they call white guilt, or it's potentially exactly what you're talking about, even if it's born out of quote unquote good intentions. Now, there are plenty of people that have nefarious intentions in this. Yeah. Well, we want to build our voter base.
And to clarify, I don't mean to suggest that people have these conscious thoughts and are sitting in their living room cooking up schemes. I don't believe it's that. I think it's a very subconscious process that's happening, and the amount of awareness a person would have if what I'm suggesting were true would probably be limited, I would imagine.
And I think it's also
blinded by our own bias and our own goodness.
Well, absolutely. And I think it's also coincides with the decrease in the impact of organized religion. It's because a lot of, in the past, it's like, our church is doing this, we're doing outreach, I think there's some of it that's the lack of religiosity in one place gets replaced with religiosity in another place. That's maybe
there will always be those kinds of abstract drivers for
Yeah.
sure, whether it's
Yep.
organized religion or something else. And if you look at like the disparity between the charitable nature of the U.S. citizens as a
Yeah.
whole versus the charitable tendencies of European countries, for example, there's a big disparity there because they've largely socialized charity,
Yep.
where we've not done that to the extent that, well, I mean, we're well on our way now, but going back 10, 15 years ago, we had not socialized charity and social programs and stuff. Like if somebody needed help, like it was on the citizens to help them because the government wasn't going to. That wasn't their role, and that is definitely shifting for sure. And again,
and that's dangerous. I mean, that's dangerous to the soul of the country. See, to me, the big problem with that is, well, if more people will say, I've had people argue this with me before. Well, if more people are helped, so what? Well, the problem is when you outsource charity, you become a less charitable person yourself.
Yeah.
And when individuals and society as a whole becomes less charitable, we become like Ebenezer Scrooge. Well, are there not poorhouses? Do I not pay my taxes?
Yeah.
We become Ebenezer Scrooge.
And again, not to be the pragmatic guy, but I'm a bit of a pragmatic guy. When you give your dollars to charity through taxes, the government takes a pretty hefty chunk of that to manage.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, you get the bureaucrat to pay $150,000 a year.
The person needing help when I give them is 100%. The percentage that go through the taxation process is, I'm going to guess, less than 10%.
Yeah, very small. Yep.
All right. Again, completely shifting gears here, and now I'm gonna more or less turn this over to you because you are obviously going to be much more of an expert on this than I am. How would you describe to Kenny G what happened with the French elections?
Well, and France is such a fascinating country. I mean, first of all, I listened to both conservative and non-conservative media because I want to triangulate kind of, the feeling. I also want to get challenges to what I believe. And so I was listening to a newscast from The Economist, which is, they're 150 years old. They're not hard left, but they're center left.
Yeah.
And they were describing what was happening there. And part of the discussion, anytime they were discussing the right-wing folks, Marine Le Pen and the National Rally, they talked about the hard right. It's the hard right. Yeah, however, when they talk about, on the left, when they talked about the left, they didn't talk about the hard left anywhere near as much. Now, that left is made up of literal communists, socialists, Greens, so they got the basically Green Party and leftists, liberal Democrats, basically. And a lot of that, I would consider a communist hard left. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just left over from the Cold War era. I don't know. But I would kind of consider them the hard left.
This is what's called being stuck in your paradigm, Dave.
I guess so. And now I have to give Emmanuel Macron and everybody other than Marie Le Pen and her National Rally, which are the right-wing folks there, who they call the hard right. Everybody else is scared to death of them. They think, in fact, if you listen to European,
everyone is scared to death of who?
Of the hard right in Europe.
Okay, gotcha.
I mean, and in fact, if you listen, as I do regularly, to a number of European broadcasts, I was listening to one today on why Dubai has a lot of millionaires moving there and a lot of people from Europe moving there, and one of the main reasons is everybody in Europe's scared of the hard right, because of the rise of the hard right, and So what Macron did, Macron in his, is a centrist, basically. I would say he's a center left person, but they had a socialist before, but too much history. But what Macron did is he said, I would rather partner with communists and socialists and people on the left who oppose my sort of business centric policy and my center policy. Some of the things that Macron's done have been pretty wise because France has an unsustainable financial situation. They let people retire too early, for instance.
Yep.
You better work your butt off. The country's going to go bankrupt. So he would rather do that. He would rather partner with those people and attempt to form some kind of government than he would the hard right. And so what they did is they went into they went before the election, and they've got one of these ranked order, systems. They pulled out candidates in a strategic way, tactical way, actually, in various places, so that either a leftist or a centrist would win, and so that the hard right came in third. Now, from a strategic perspective, brilliant. That was very smart. But from they're doing what they do after elections in France. They're rioting in the streets. That's just kind of
This is the new twist, though, is the winners are rioting, not the
yes, exactly right. Well, but the hard left doesn't know anything else to do but riot. We won. Let's go burn stuff down.
I've never heard of a communist or a hard leftist like building something in memorial of it. They're always just tearing things down.
It's what they do. It's their method of partying. Let's go burn down a cafe down the street. Vive la France.
Right. So the reason I bring this up is because it feels to me, again, I wasn't alive back then. You were only a teenager back in the 1930s. So
that's right.
I wouldn't know, but it does feel like this time through our fourth turning and crisis era cycle, it's more global than it was before.
It is. Yeah.
And so the same things that we are experiencing here, they are experiencing over in Europe.
Yeah.
And natural born French, British, German, Dutch, Finnish, whatever citizens are being inundated more so, I would say, than us, just by sheer volume, by numbers, people from third world countries, not traditionally liberal ideologies as far as like how you treat women and how many wives you can have and how hard you beat your wife and like all that kind of stuff. And the countries are it seems to, I'm not there, I wouldn't know, but just based on what I'm seeing, like they're being overrun. Like the neighborhoods are being displaced. Like people are being forced to move because people with new value sets are moving in and just like scaring the crap out of them, and they're leaving. And there's much reporting about, natural born French women citizens feeling unsafe to walk in their own neighborhoods and things like that.
Right.
It's reported here in the U.S. very little. Very little of that is making it, especially to like, corporate media kind of structures. Like very little, if any, of that is being reported.
Right.
You have to go to the Substacks and the Fox News and podcasts and, the Ben Shapiro's of the world to kind of hear about this stuff. But it seems like it's happening on a bigger scale there than here, but it's happening everywhere. Like it is not so the point I want to make to Kenny G is this is not a US thing.
No,
this is a traditional Western values thing that are being attacked. Right.
That's it.
And again, I keep using the same example just because it illustrates to me the loss of any kind of logical framing of what's happening.
Right.
The same people that say we're all for people from Tunisia or China or wherever who don't share our values going to France and literally taking over the government and changing the values and the structure and Sharia law and like what those things are like. That's what's necessary because colonialism and other isms and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All right. They're all for that. If I ask the same person, how do you look at what happened to the Native Americans or the Hawaiians? Like Hawaii is like my favorite illustration of this because if you look at like what happened in Hawaii, like Hawaii was overrun by an outside force with different values.
Right.
And the same people who would say, I'm all for Tunisia taking over France would say colonialism was what ruined Hawaii.
Exactly.
And they're the exact same steps, behaviors, everything is exactly the same.
Right.
I find no difference in what happened to Hawaii and what's happening to France.
Yeah.
The same people look at both those situations and they're all for one and absolutely against the other.
Right. Exactly right. And the reason is because we're talking about, you mentioned it, it's an attack on Western values. So
Yeah.
why is the same thing happening in Sweden or Germany or the UK or wherever? Why is immigration the big thing that's leading to the populist right coming to power in certain places? It's because there is an attack on the most fundamental culture of Western values, whether it's here or whether it's in any of these countries. And a certain number of people recognize, hey, there is something special about Western values, and all value systems are not the same. There are some value systems that lead to better outcomes for human flourishing than other value systems. And we're in a civilizational struggle. Part of what, any conquering, now this, I don't want to get into conspiracy theories, but any conquering general or nation that goes into another nation and they completely overrun it, what do? They replace the existing culture and language and people with their own. So that's how they take over.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think there's one single force that's attempting to do this. I don't think it's like, that's what's happening. But
I don't imagine there's a fancy dining room somewhere in the Alps where like Mortimer Frothingham and his friends are like rubbing their hands together planning this thing, right?
It's probably Klaus Schwab, I don't know. It's probably, he's in trouble. But it is the way that you bring down a culture, which Western civilization is a culture. It's based on things, the logic that you and I keep talking about that came up through Greece and Rome. It's based on the religious values that came through the biblical systems, through Jerusalem, etc. And the Middle East that propagated. So that's where the real battle is. And some people see it and some people don't. And that's where the divide is in each country.
Yeah. And I think that there is an upper crust somewhere who's benefiting from this and
sure,
maybe not planning and plotting and pulling strings, but they're certainly helping to facilitate. I would say that. And I imagine that being no different than earlier. I was talking about the wealthy family living on the Upper East Side in New York who wants the immigrants to come over so they can feel righteous for helping these people.
Sure.
But really maybe the driver is I have this underclass of people that I'm in a superior position to. I think that same exact behavior is happening at that elite level, that the attack on Western values. Yeah, the people from Tunisia are going to come take over France and look at all the righteous things I did and how I helped those poor people. Right. And what I get in return is they do the stuff I don't want to do.
Exactly right. And they vote for me and they keep me in power because I scratch your back, you scratch mine.
Look where they were at then and look where they're at now. Their life has improved 100-fold. And all I ask is that they pick my lettuce and vote for me.
Yeah, there you go. And that's what keeps people rich and in power.
And this is where I go back to there's only 2 stories ever told in human history.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's true. It just repeats itself. It's got different colors and different flavors and it wears something different, but it's basically all the same.
Yeah. So I think the thing I would part with in this episode for Kenny G is when you see that loss of objectivity, where you can't see the difference in what happened to Hawaii and what's happening in France, when simultaneous, virtually identical actions have happened and one side is championed for one and hoping for the ruination of others in the same exact scenario, then you're in it.
Yeah, you're deep in it. You're thick in it.
You're deep in it. Yeah,
that's called a crisis era.
It is called a crisis era, and it's going to be fascinating to see how it all unfolds. That's for sure. Yep. Well, hey, as Dave mentioned in the opening, if you think we completely lost our minds, we'd love to hear your opinion on that. You can go to unsilentpodcast.com. Rumble has a great comment section. You can drop us a note there. Also, if you think we got something right, we'd love to hear where you think we're on the right track. Our point here is to explain to future generations what this moment in time is like to live through. And Dave and I can certainly share our own experiences, but we can't speak for everyone. And we'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And that's it for now. Until next time, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.